so many of us give up too early, sort of surrender to aging, maybe even tell ourselves that we're being noble, that we're being graceful about accepting getting older and slowing down. But I don't think we have to give in as much as perhaps we think. I think we can still do incredible things through our 50s, 60s, 70s, and even beyond. And we should give ourselves that opportunity because it will enrich our lives just absolutely incredibly.
Hi, I'm Mike Capuzzi, and welcome back to Unstoppable After 50. What really connected with me on this episode was the idea of setting a big goal, a goal that you probably are not comfortable with, and then doing the daily consistent habits to achieve it. My guest today is Jeff Weiss, an author, an entrepreneur, and an ultra marathoner whose story and journey will inspire you. If you're looking to start 2026 strong, this episode delivers. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, I know this has been a long time coming. I know you just released your third book, and we were trying to time it with the release of that book, Racing Against Time. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
I was looking forward to this conversation, Jeff, because you went from running your first 10K, I believe at 48,
That's
a
correct.
72-mile ultra marathon in your late 50s, all while helping build a business which eventually sold for $3 billion. What changed in you, Jeff, in your second half of life to allow you to accomplish all that?
I think for me, and I don't think the two events are unrelated. I think they actually were mutually supportive. When I first got started with the company, with the startup, I read a book by Jim Collins, Good to Great, about companies that had essentially separated themselves from their competition and become leaders in their particular industries. And he talked about one of the things that was common to those journeys was the setting of a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And it really focused a company's efforts and was very motivating and really helped get everybody kind of on the same page, working hard toward a goal that was going to be incredibly challenging and perhaps at the very outer limit of what was possible. Not quite not impossible, but not easily accomplished either. And as I read it, I thought, you know what, this actually could apply on the individual level as well, to set a personal BHAG and really to apply yourself to that, to have that be kind of your motivating force through the more challenging times as you prepared for something that was going to be difficult for you to achieve. And so my first BHAG was a 56-mile ultra marathon in 2018. And then the one that I set for after that was to do a full Ironman race, 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile cycle, and then a full marathon at the end. And it really did have that kind of impact on me. And again, it entirely overlapped with the startup journey and really made both things just, they really enriched my life all the way through my 50s, which was fantastic for me.
Yeah. And any one of those things, Jeff, is a BHAG, if you will, right? I mean, it's really, it's an amazing thing what you have done and built in your life and when people research and see what you've done. I'd like to go back, though, in time a bit. Now, this is obviously a podcast for men over 50, but I want to go back because from what I gather, you weren't always thinking this way. You weren't always doing this. Can you kind of share where you were? And, you mentioned the Jim Collins book, but there had to be another spark in there to really, because these aren't just goals. These are very big goals. What was that like? Where were you and what was that spark?
When I was younger, I had been serious about athletics. I played college tennis at the Division III level, but still played it in a serious way, and then shifted to powerlifting for a number of years. And kind of after I got married, had kids, still lifted weights occasionally, but not in a consistent way, and was just aging, I think, in the way that so many of us do, slowing down, getting less serious about my physical training and all of that. And then my dad passed away when I was 47, and the following year was helping my mother downsize. And it occurred to me that that thing so many of us tell ourselves that we'll get fit later when we have time, that the time was now. There was no more putting that off into the future. And so that really got me to look at different options. I saw a notice about a running class that was the culmination of which would be the running of a 10K. And so I decided to sign up for that. And then just kind of got bitten by the bug and did a few more 10Ks. And then, as so many runners do, decided, maybe I could do a half marathon. If I did that, maybe I could do a full. And it started to naturally build from there, which was amazing.
When you were on this journey, Jeff, were there were you working out with guys? Were there people kind of were you doing this alone, or were you doing this with a buddy, or what did that look like?
I did it alone in the sense that I did not train with the group, other than that first 2 month running class. And I don't actually think that's the ideal way to do it. I do think it's better to do it with a buddy or with a group of buddies. I admire folks who cycle with a cycling group or who run with a running club or things of that sort. I think that's great. But I think the way that guys like me who train alone can still build in a virtual sense community is by I read a lot of memoirs, and honestly, that's part of why I wrote Racing Against Time was to provide one of those to other people, and they were sort of my company, they were my mentors, my inspiration about the different things that I could do that were potentially possible, even though perhaps in the past I might have thought that they were out of my reach. And so that really, and I'm a big book on tape listener, and so would listen to those things while doing my workouts, and it was quite inspirational.
Again, ultra marathon, Ironman, these are at the top echelon of, the running game. So it wasn't like you just said, when you were 47, 48, I'm just going to start jogging, getting out there, working out. What was it about that goal? Because I'm sure for guys listening to this, just getting out and exercising on a regular basis, running, whatever it might be, that's a pretty big, hairy, audacious goal. Why this extreme level of running?
I think a couple things. I think like a lot of guys, I like structure and I like organization and I like to just say I'm going to get fit. That's vague and that's hard. But to say I'm going to train for this race, which means I have to follow this particular plan for the following 16, 18, or 20 weeks or whatever it might be, that's something intellectually, emotionally I can get my head around. Um, and so I think that's what made races very appealing to me. Then I really did love the idea of setting progressively more challenging goals to basically look for new mountains to climb, each time meaning a new training plan, a new focus, a new, kind of way to approach it that I could really sink my teeth into. So for me, I think the racing actually was just a great organizing principle for this, more amorphous goal of I want to get into better shape before it's too late.
So what about the guy that's, listening or watching this right now, Jeff, and, an Ironman is not in his future. What endurance principles still, from that, what you've learned, what endurance principle for strength and longevity would you say, would apply to that person?
At first, I think to be clear, I'm not an evangelist for ultras or for Ironman in the sense that they've done great things for me. They're not for everybody. And I don't think it's an essential part of getting in shape. What I do think is essential, though, is finding something that really speaks to you, that motivates you, that will get you out of bed in a consistent way. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the guiding principles has to be that you do need to work out if you're serious about this multiple times a week consistently, I think honestly for the rest of your life. And so the secret to doing that is find activities that you're going to sufficiently enjoy. And that word enjoy, you have to be careful with. It's not enjoyment in the same, I think for most of us, in the same way that you might enjoy a ride at a county fair. It's enjoyment in the sense that you feel good, particularly right after you've finished doing it. You feel good about changes that you're seeing in your body. You're feeling good about changes that you're seeing in your energy level. You're feeling good about how you feel about yourself, perhaps your ability to, stay in the work game with younger colleagues for a longer period of time. I think there are lots of wonderful, good, enjoyable things that come out of training, but it's not going to be It's not going to be kind of laugh out loud fun in the way that we might, experience in other parts of our lives.
Well, and I think that, setting that expectation and reality, and I'll be interested in hearing your answer to this. As a collegiate athlete years ago, and now, in the second half of your life, did you find it a challenge to remember how you used to perform, how you used to recover, and then the reality of, being in your 50s, 60s, et cetera? Was that a challenge for you?
It wasn't for one reason in particular. I wasn't doing the same sports that I had done earlier. So I wasn't powerlifting and then comparing my totals to what they once had been. I wasn't playing tennis and comparing my performance to the way that I had performed when I was in my late teens and 20s. Running was a completely new sport for me. And I read somewhere once, and it really did hold true for me, that no matter when you start as a runner, you can look forward to about 10 years of gains. And that really was my experience. In fact, for me, it went on longer than 10 years. I ran my fastest marathon in 2024, 12 years after running my first marathon in 2012. And so yeah, I think picking a different sport, if that's possible for folks, I think that removes some of that risk that you're going to get down because you're going to, keep remembering or being reminded of how much better you were at one point. But if you really do want to pick up a prior sport, you just have to discipline yourself to not be comparing, your 55-year-old self to your 25 or 15-year-old self.
Yeah, 100%. And you also mentioned the reality of, finding something that you enjoy doing. And it may not be fun per se, like a country fair ride, but it's got to be something that you're going to stick with and do. And I think so many guys, Jeff, they'll watch videos online, they'll read books, and they'll sort of adapt them. They'll say, well, they say I need to do this, I need to be biking, or I need to be doing whatever it might be, something that may not align. What advice do you have for guys that maybe haven't found that particular activity or activities that they really should be doing?
I think to me, a couple things. I think physical fitness really has the potential, if not the certainty, of transforming a person's life. So this really is worth the effort to investigate different possibilities. And there's so many out there. It can be cycling, it can be spinning, it can be rowing, it can be yoga, it can be Pilates, it can be running, it can be pickleball, it can be a million different things. And honestly, it should be more than one thing. I think cross training really is the ideal. And there are fitness classes as well. I mean, there just are a lot of options. I think you have to try things a few times before you can reject them because the very first time trying something, very typically is not going to be a good experience. But as you get a little more proficient, it can be a very wonderful experience. And so yeah, I think also I read a book early on called Younger Next Year, which is a book that I would enthusiastically recommend to any of us entering their 50s. And talking about the power of fitness to really transform how we age, and it gives very practical guidance, basically recommending ideally 6 workouts a week, each of no less than 45 minutes in duration, and including within that two resistance training sessions. They don't have to be 45-minute sessions, but you can split two of your sessions to 30 minutes of cardio and 15 minutes of resistance. But for me, I took that very literally, and I think it really helped me. And so I started with just a mix of running, spinning, and swimming, and that filled out the 6 workouts for me. I typically ran 3 times, did spinning twice, and swam once, and really came to enjoy all three in the sense that they felt good for me, and I liked what they were doing for me. Um, so I like that as a rule of thumb. If somebody truly believes they can't do 6 days, I still would pick a number that's multiple days and that you really can and will stick with. And I'm also a fan of, from the area of personal finance, they talk about paying yourself first. If you want to save money, take money out of your paycheck before you spend money on anything else, and put it away or put it in the stock market, whatever you're going to do with it. Here as well, I think for me, working out first thing in the morning was my way of paying myself first because, especially in the startup world, once the day starts, you don't really own that day anymore. But from 5 to 6:30 in the morning, you do own that, or 6 to 7 or whatever it might be. And so, I think that's a way to really, make that your priority and make sure that it actually happens.
Yeah, it's great practical advice, and again, it sounds so simple. Oftentimes, it's a bit of a challenge for guys to implement, but it's great advice, and it really is in itself a smart goal. So, Jeff, you were doing all this, and you also published your third book, Racing Against Time. So, again, congratulations, that recently published. Why did you decide to write this book?
I really wanted to give back. For me, fitness has been great. It's been life-changing in so many ways. And I felt like I owed a real debt of gratitude to people like Dean Karnassus, Rich Roll, David Goggins, and others who wrote very inspirational fitness memoirs about kind of transformations that they experienced in their lives. And it really helped me along the way. It helped me figure out kind of the different things I wanted to try, gave me some good practical advice. And so I felt like there was kind of an arc to my story that could be helpful to people. I also felt like I think one challenge with some of those authors is they can seem, especially David Goggins, superhuman. And I am not superhuman. I'm not an especially fast runner. I'm not an especially strong swimmer or cyclist. So I think, if I can do these things, I think a whole lot of folks who perhaps have ruled them out could do them as well. And so hopefully the story is a relatable one for people.
And I don't have to be interested in running or ultra marathons or trying to do an Ironman to gain benefit by reading your book, do I?
No, not at all. I think for me, so much of I think just being consistent with fitness will have those great effects. And honestly, if you don't do those other sports, you'll probably have fewer injuries, which is not an entirely bad thing, because when you do take on the more extreme endurance events, you can pretty much be guaranteed that you're going to along the way have an injury here, an injury there, that you're going to have to wrestle with. But if you're doing something that is, I think more restrained and more mainstream, you're probably not going to have those same kinds of challenges.
So somebody, buys Racing Against Time, reads it, a guy in his 50s and his 60s, what would be one or two big takeaways from your book you would hope they take away?
I think the importance of being consistent. I think the importance of committing yourself to a particular program. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be willing to change it up. Particularly if you decide, what, this particular sport is really not for me. I need to find a different one. But really committing yourself, in particular, to a set number of days per week, a set number of time for each of those workouts. I probably would start a little bit on the lower side with the goal of increasing rather than going in the other direction. But I think to me that is just absolutely hugely important. To be in the way that I think men are accustomed. Be very literal, be very practical, be very pragmatic. And if you want to do this, you can only get so far reading a bunch of inspirational stories and inspirational slogans and no pain, no gain, and all the rest of it. But really getting into the practicalities of how do I make this happen in my life.
What about if you could rewind 20 years and knowing what you've done now, what you've been able to accomplish these last 2 decades, is there something that you would tell yourself as you are approaching 50 to either be aware of, be careful of, maybe a myth that you want to bust? What would you tell your younger self?
I think I would tell myself, keep going. If anything, I might have pushed harder, faster. I didn't try ultra marathons until I was 56, 8 years after that first 10K. I didn't do my first Ironman until I was 57. I think I might have accelerated some of that stuff. I think I could have probably taken on an ultras 3 or 4 years earlier and perhaps done a little bit better and maybe even positioned myself to take on a 100 miler, which was the goal that at one point I seriously considered and then ultimately decided to put to one side. But yeah, I think for me, it was a great journey of discovery, and I just never stopped being surprised at how much I could do beyond what I had thought possible for me. I had once told a friend that I was as likely to run a marathon as I was to walk on the moon. And I think I still would have said that after the 10K, um, maybe after the second or third 10K. But after doing the half marathon, it was like, well, you know what? Actually, maybe that doesn't sound so crazy. And then after doing a few marathons, well, maybe the ultra's not so crazy. But I think I probably, in hindsight, could have moved a little bit quicker. But having said that, I also think there's a lot of value in if you can do it, working with a coach. I think that makes it safer and more effective and more structured and honestly requires a little bit less time from you as the athlete in terms of trying to figure all of this stuff out because it can get a little bit complicated.
Yeah. Well, I got chills when you said that because I love the thought of, as you were progressing, you didn't think something was possible, which all of us do, right? We all have that head trash. I can't run a marathon. I can't run an ultra marathon, whatever it might be. I can't work out every day. I can't, walk every day, whatever it might be. But to your point of just being, a normal guy, but with goals and realizing the importance of those goals and knowing what's driving those goals, it can make it achievable. So I love the fact that you shared that, Jeff. And speaking of the Ironman, the motto is anything is possible. What are your thoughts about that?
I guess I would say it's mostly true. I would say that lots of things are possible, and this won't fit on a t-shirt as nicely as anything is possible. But I guess, almost anything is possible, or a lot more is possible than you might have thought. I think that is certainly the case. If you had said to 48-year-old me that one day you'll be able to do an Ironman race, I would have said you're crazy. That's just so beyond the realm of what's possible for me. I would have said probably the same thing about a marathon still at that point in time. And so I do think it's a helpful slogan to get ourselves thinking about, what constraints, what limitations have we placed on ourselves, and are they really valid, or are we just not tested ourselves? And I think it's true not just in the fitness part of our lives, but also in the professional part of our lives. Where have we held back? Where have we not really made an effort to do something pretty extraordinary? I love the Carol Dweck book, Mindset, and I think we really do want to, in all spheres of our life, cultivate a growth mindset and to not place mental limits and to open ourselves up to the possibility that we can do things that, perhaps at one point we thought were completely out of the question.
Yeah, again, I appreciate that. And that's one of the goals of this podcast. I've identified 7 strengths: body, inner strength, family strength, wealth, passion, purpose. These are things that men in the second half of life have to really be focused on, should be focused on. And to your point, it does have this breadth. It's not just you running ultra marathons. There's a spillover effect in other parts of your life. And I think that is so important. It's the goal. It's the reason why I've started this podcast, is to just share with men, give them ideas like you've done today, inspire them. So it's, again, I appreciate that. Jeff, is there anything either from your book, your newest book, or just your journey in general that I haven't asked you, but you would want to share with guys over 50?
There's a saying that we often hear that nobody on their deathbed looks back and says, "I wish I'd spent more time in the office." But I think there's a more kind of profound issue, which is, in our final decade of life, what kind of life do we want to look back on? Do we want to look back on a life that had adventure, that had audacity, that had risk? Or do we want to look on a life in which, back on a life in which we always took the easy way, that we didn't try things that were scary to us? There was one particular race that I tried and actually failed at. And I bought, I have 4 kids. I bought 4 keychains at the race. And when I got back home, I had them each close their eyes and put out their hands. And I put a keychain in each hand. And I basically said, look, I tried it. It didn't work, but I'm so happy I tried. And if I've learned nothing else in life, it's that I think the things we most regret looking back are the things that we were afraid to try, not the things that we tried and didn't work out, and that didn't work out the way that we had hoped that they would. So I think, I think we have too much fear of failure. I think we have too much willingness to avoid discomfort and to not take risks. But I think there's so much long-term satisfaction and happiness and growth from actually being willing to take on challenges that are perhaps a bit out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, what a great life lesson for your kids too. It may not have seemed it at the time, but I'm sure they'll remember that in the future and think about what you were actually sharing there. So very cool. So Jeff, as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to this part of the show, I call it the Unstoppable After 50 Trifecta. It's 3 quick questions, 3 quick answers. Now you've addressed the second one a couple times, but maybe you'll have a fresh idea. But the first one I want to ask you is, what is just one action, one habit, one decision that you made after age 50 that you think made the biggest difference in your life?
I think committing myself to a specific um, workout goal. It just for me became very, very easy that I was going to work out 6 days a week, and each one was going to be. And at the beginning, for the first year or two, literally 45 minutes. I mean, I'd look at my watch, and when I hit 45 minutes, that was the end of that workout. Again, if somebody feels like, no, I can't do 6, but I could do 4, I could do 3, and I could do 30 minutes each time, not 45. Set that target and just commit yourself to it. After a couple of years, I felt like I was as likely to skip a workout as I was to skip a night's sleep. Like it just became, and look, that's the other piece, of course, is to really integrate it into your life as a habit, something that you do without thought, without struggle, without the need to resort to willpower, which, of course, at the end of the day, is not an especially powerful tool in your toolkit, but habits really are. So turn it into a habit, and you'll be amazed at how routine it can become and how easy it can become to work out consistently.
You shared several books. Obviously, in addition to your own book, do you want to repeat one of them, or is there another book you definitely recommend guys read?
I loved Younger Next Year. I really loved both of David Goggins's books. He's most famous for Can't Hurt Me, his first book, but his second book, Never Finished, actually is probably a more appropriate book for middle-aged athletes. It's him in his, I think, mid to late 40s. And he gets so much attention for just being a super tough guy who does incredible things and seems to be superhuman at times. But I actually think if you read his books, you will find that there's an amazing amount of emotional depth there. And I think he really understands how much athletic success can translate into just overall emotional well-being and an ability to be effective in other areas of our life as well. And I couldn't agree more with that sentiment.
And finally, what is your Unstoppable After 50 challenge that someone watching or listening to this right now can implement this week?
I'm a big believer in specifics. I would say sit down for 30 to 60 minutes this week. Pick a day. Sit down for 30 to 60 minutes and for your personal life, for your professional life, and for your physical well-being, identify basically areas in which you would like to improve, and then give yourself a week, and then sit down at the same time the next week and put in some very practical things that you intend to do. For your personal life, it can be reconnecting with an old friend, and of course, social interaction, friendships are so important to aging successfully. With fitness, it can be joining a health club, joining a running club, signing up for a couch to 5K program. Employment wise, it could be starting a job search. It could be looking for an opportunity to advance within your own company. It could be considering taking on a new particular assignment at work that maybe you've been shying away from. But be specific. I think if you can attach tangible actions to these things, you can start to make some good progress.
So Jeff, how can my audience learn more about you? Where can they connect with you? All that good stuff.
I have an author website, jeffreyweissauthor.com. The book Racing Against Time, of course, is available on Amazon as a print book, as a Kindle ebook, and also as an audiobook. But yeah, and if folks want to reach out using the contact page on the website, listeners to this podcast, I will send them a 10 tips, my 10 tips for essentially incorporating fitness into your life.
Jeff, again, congratulations on your latest book. Congratulations with the goal of changing yourself, but more importantly now, helping other guys, other people. Really learn from you and hopefully adopt some of the, mindset and skills that you've been able to do. So I just appreciate fully the impact that you're looking to make with, in this case, men over 50. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, and really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jeff Weiss, and I hope you took away some important ideas and strategies you can implement in your life. By all means, check out his book, Racing Against Time. It's a great book. Definitely help you. Now, if you found this episode helpful, please consider sharing it with friends. I'd love a review on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. That would really help me, so I appreciate that. And make sure you check out unstoppableafter50.com. There's a weekly newsletter. Sign up for that. I don't spam you or anything like that. I just share really smart, helpful information for guys over 50. So thank you very much. Check out unstoppableafter50.com.